What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So yesterday, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth reviews went live, and some of the scores coming in for this game were absolutely ridiculous, and it got to the point that this game has done something we have not seen for the Final Fantasy series since the original PlayStation days, and we're going to go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Sony pushing a pretty big announcement and an update for their PlayStation VR 2, bringing some heavily requested, we'll say, compatibility for that headset. And then we're also going to be talking about a game that appears slated for the Nintendo Switch 2 according to a recent report, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below, and of course, for members, you do get Newswave early and ad-free. If you want to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Spider-Man 2 and that New Game Plus update. It was supposed to have come out at the end of 2023, but it got pushed into 2024, and then they were talking about March. Well, now we have the exact release date for it. This we can see was posted up over on the Insomniac official X account, saying an exciting new update launches March 7th, bringing a suite of highly requested features to Marvel Spider-Man 2. This includes New Game Plus, Hellfire Gala suits, symbiote suit styles, time of day changes, and more. I know time of day has been heavily requested, we'll say, by many players out there for this game, but New Game Plus is the big thing a lot of people were looking for. I will say, March 7th, that's tough. It's like right in the middle of some pretty big releases. We're about to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and basically everything is going on hold for me to play through that game, and that's going to run probably up to this point. And then after that, we have a bunch of other titles hitting in March. So it's unfortunately, this is an update I probably won't be able to check out right away, and maybe later on in the year when I get a chance, and then I got to go back and relearn a lot of the stuff in Spider-Man 2, but still, for people who are still playing Spider-Man 2 or maybe looking forward to playing it, it'll be good to know that New Game Plus and some of these other updates will be available here in just a few weeks. Also, we had a bit of a surprise drop in the Xbox Game Pass, as we did go over some of the new titles for the service to round out February and go into March, but it appears they had one more trick up their sleeves. In fact, we can see this is posted up, this over on the Dead Island X account, saying awesome news, Zompocalypse is spreading to Xbox Game Pass for Ultimate members. What are you waiting for? Yeah, so out of nowhere, Dead Island 2 just started appearing in Game Pass on people's dashboard where it kind of advertised different games in the service, and people are taking pictures and just kind of mentioning it online, and it turns out they decided just randomly to drop Dead Island 2 into Game Pass. So hey, if you've never played it before, I definitely recommend downloading it and trying it out. It kind of fits into that, I guess, that AA category, although it still looks pretty good visually. The gameplay, yes, is straightforward, but it is a really fun title that if you played the old Condemned, just as an example from, we'll say, the Xbox 360 days, where there's a heavy focus on first-person melee combat, this plays right into that. And of course, the zombies themselves will get broken up and destroyed in some pretty gruesome ways. It's a whole system they came up with for it. But yeah, I recommend checking it out. Obviously, in Game Pass, it's pretty straightforward. Go in there, download it, and see what you think. Oh, and here's a pretty big surprise. Neostream showed up out of nowhere with a new trailer for Little Devil Inside. This is a game that's gone quiet for a while now. It was first revealed, I believe, back in like 2015, almost 10 years ago, and there were some issues apparently in development. It was a Kickstarter project, but there's a trailer you can see that shows some gameplay, and this is all done now in Unreal Engine 5, and they gave a bit of an explanation along with this trailer release, saying that behind the scenes, though, I guess there were too many cooks in the kitchen, and they had to shrink down some of their headcount to where I guess people could agree on things and they could rein in some of the scope. But this obviously is good news that they showed up with something at least tangible here with the gameplay trailer. And I am hoping, obviously, for all of the backers out there that this game does eventually come out. But at least it appears they're back on track with this trailer release. I don't know if it's coming out this year. I would probably figure no, maybe next year. And hey, technically then it could coincide with the 10-year anniversary of when they first revealed the thing. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's out next week on the 29th because leap year, and I'm sure Nomura wants to be weird about it and stuff, but either way, it is out next week, and I'm very excited for this game, especially after seeing all those reviews dropping yesterday, and this appears to be like the best Final Fantasy game we've had, and I'm not even kidding, decades. In fact, we can see this over on Metacritic, currently sitting at a score of 93. That's on 119 reviews. In fact, if you take a look at the critic split, 115 positive, 0 negative, and they have 4 that are unscored at this time. But this at 93, I mean, 119 reviews, that's enough to be like, okay, I feel like that Metacritic score is going to stay where it is, but hey, we'll see. A second highest rated Final Fantasy game, only behind Final Fantasy IX, which sits at a 94. That's right, we have to go back to the original PlayStation days to find a Final Fantasy game that rates higher than this one, and that's the only other one above it. I mean, think about all the Final Fantasy games out there. This is the second highest rated one, so very impressive stuff. If we take a look at some of the reviews here, there were many that were perfect scores that were 90s, 95s. I had to dig deep to find just 8 out of 10s, and I think that was the lowest scores, so we'll go through a couple of them here. We have Attack of the Fanboy, who says, Final Fantasy VII Remake evoked all kinds of emotions in me, made me see my low-poly childhood friends as real people, and allowed me to once again be part of a grandiose, fate-challenging, God-defying adventure that I haven't experienced since the PS1 days. We have Cog Connected, who gave it a 95 out of 100, says this Final Fantasy VII project is a massive undertaking of an impossible scale. A single release stretched into 3 games, preposterous, and yet, so far the team is totally nailing it. The first game was a smash hit, and Rebirth runs laps around it in almost every way. Game Informer gave it an 8.5 out of 10, so I went a little further on the other side of the spectrum here. The best of Remake exists in Rebirth, but the various open world areas surrounding it, the parts that make Rebirth unique from its predecessor, sometimes miss the mark. So I was curious about kind of that open world aspect, because we know open world games can suffer from fatigue. So that's something I guess to keep an eye on there, and I'll see for myself when I pick the game up. Shaq News gave it an 8 out of 10, said, while there is a lot to love in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it left me disappointed in its main narrative. I wish it was more focused on telling the story set out in Remake, and its constant need to push the kitchen sink into each plot beat wore on my resolve throughout the game. I am incredibly curious how weird the story gets in this game. After what they did with Final Fantasy VII Remake and just kind of set up this, we'll say, splitting path in front of us and interconnecting stories, I feel like it's just going to get even weirder because they have a whole other game to release. Remember, this is a trilogy. We're just on the second game now, so that's my biggest thing, is the story and what happens. Although the gameplay in the demo has been awesome. If you missed it, there is the second part of the demo that is now live. They also worked to clean up the performance mode a bit, but it still looks kind of blurry, so it's tough. It's like you pick 30, and it looks pretty good, but if you want that smooth 60, it blurs the whole thing up. So, hey, PS5 Pro coming later on this year. Hopefully that can fix all of that up. But yeah, I'm ready for this game. I'm happy to see that it's turned out like this at a 93, and people seem very, very high on it. And I guess at this point would fall into online of a Game of the Year contender already, just a couple of months into 2024. But again, I'll be picking it up next week when it releases, and I'm sure we'll be talking all about it on the podcast that weekend. Oh, and I guess this is a good time to mention that, yes, spoilers are all over the place right now online. In fact, over on the official Final Fantasy account, they posted up this image here that basically just asks people to stop sharing anything that would be deemed heavy spoiler territory, because they didn't go in there and disable recording privileges on the PS5, which you can. If there are certain cutscenes you just don't want people to be able to hit the share button on, you can just stop them from doing it outright, but they did not do that, and they're just asking people to be polite and respectful, which, it's the internet, so good luck with that one, unfortunately. But hey, everything's looking good here so far for Rebirth, so excited to get to next Thursday, the 29th, I figure, when it comes out, so I can check it out for myself. Next up, let's talk about Sony and their PlayStation VR 2, as they pushed a blog post yesterday detailing some new games and a new update for the headset that people have been asking for constantly. It appears Sony is ready to deliver this year. But we can see this over on PlayStation blog. I just took note of all the different games that they had gone over here, starting with The Wizards Dark Times Brotherhood, that's out now. Wanderer, The Fragments of Fate, that's out June 27th. Little Cities Bigger, that's out March 12th. Zombie Army VR, out 2024. Arizona Sunshine 2, it's a free update, out now. And then Soul Covenant, it's out in 2024. Now, to follow all this up, there was a part of this blog post that everyone honed in on. As I say, also, we're pleased to share that we are currently testing the ability for PSVR 2 players to access additional games on PC to offer even more variety in addition to the PSVR 2 titles available through PS5. We hope to make this support available in 2024, so stay tuned for more updates. I don't think it's a secret that the PSVR 2 sales are just not very good, like, at all. We've seen some different sales figures out of Amazon as an example, and I mean, it's bad. Like, compared to even the Quest 2 or the Quest 3, I mean, we're talking like 3 or 4 times the amount of those headsets individually even are moving over the PSVR 2. And I do feel like when you tie it to just a PlayStation 5 system, of course, you're already limiting the amount of people who would buy the headset, but also the headset's just more expensive than the system itself. Whereas in PC land, it's actually a decent bargain for a headset. Again, I know it's like $550 or whatever, but if you look at PCs, to get a decent video card, sometimes it's double that. So in this case, to go alongside of the higher end headsets on PC, it should actually fit in pretty nicely in terms of the pricing tiers. I'm curious how they're going to do this, because sure, they could release a driver and say, go for it on Steam, but also Valve would have to be aware of that being a thing. Does this mean that they're going to play into a launcher of some kind that they're creating for PC? Because I kind of think it might. Now, it doesn't mean it wouldn't have compatibility on Steam, and some of the developers there would just have to work into that, and I guess Steam would, or Valve would also include that with compatibility there, but something to consider. While I'm sure it would be really, really cool to have PSVR 2 on PC, is this going to be that monkey paw situation where you ask for it, and then the one of the fingers goes down, and then up there's a PC launcher that you have to use for it to work? Just something to think about, but I'm hoping that it's a pretty straightforward driver situation and you can just use it based on what compatibility there is in individual games over on Steam and just Windows in general. Next up, let's talk about HiFi Rush, as it is, of course, going to PlayStation 5, and there were a lot of questions around why it's not on Switch, considering there was that data mining that took place around the update, and it showed seemingly a specific textures files for, or at least a graphic for PlayStation, and then a graphic that appeared to line up to the Switch. Well, we can see this is posted up. This is over on Insider Gaming, as they did cover the announcement as it was happening. And at the bottom, it says it's currently unclear if HiFi Rush will be making its way to the Switch or not either, but sources have suggested that the game will be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, rather than the original Switch. So it could be a few more months before an official announcement. You know, I noticed here, many different outlets, like Eurogamer as an example, started picking up this story and running it out of just like this paragraph, and I kind of think I know why, because I do believe that HiFi Rush is going to Nintendo's next system. Again, we'll just call it the Nintendo Switch 2 at this time, but it won't be going to the current Switch. And you might be wondering, why is that? Well, HiFi Rush, as people, of course, will look at the cel-shaded visuals and just figure, oh, of course that could run on the Switch. And I'm sure it could, but would it run to a point that they are comfortable with? And what I mean by that is this is a game that is very reliant on a steady frame rate, and a frame rate, quite frankly, sitting at least around 60 frames. Remember, everything in that world is consistently on beat, and if you have slowdown or even a halved frame rate at 30, which is typically the strategy that these developers will go with, they'll cut down, say, the PS4, PS5 version from 60 down to 30, like with Doom, and then lower the resolution to make it work on the Switch. And I kind of feel like maybe they would have played around with that here and just been like, nah, you know, that's just not going to work. But if we can be there, say, in time for the launch of Nintendo's next system, it would probably do really well. And in fact, I think it would. I mean, take the Switch now, when it first came out, and we had games that were there in a fairly limited launch lineup, but most of them did fairly well, at least above, I'm sure, what expectations were. You could even look at something like 1-2 Switch. That was mostly there to show off how the functionality of the Joy-Con would affect things in games, but that sold over 3 million copies. Even Bomberman did pretty well. So I think HiFi Rush being there alongside of Nintendo's next system, especially in Japan for Tango Gameworks, would do incredibly well for that game just being purchased a la carte. And I think that is the strategy. So I wouldn't be shocked, is what I'll say right now, if HiFi Rush was there at launch, or even within the launch window for Nintendo's next system, especially if it is coming out, we'll say, in that first quarter of 2025. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts in Japan. These, of course, go over all the different sales week to week of different video games over the counter, so these would be all physical sales. We can see this, though, posted up. This is over on Install Base Forum. And we'll start with the top 10. We have Mario vs. Donkey Kong. That, of course, coming out on Friday. 61,930 copies. I want to point out, for this game in particular, particular, this could be the best selling Mario vs. Donkey Kong game at launch we've seen. On the DS, there was the second one, March of the Minis. That came in with 83,000 copies sold, but remember, there was no digital for that. This would probably have, I mean, at this point, we're seeing as much as a 50-50 ratio for physical to digital, but even if there was an additional 25,000 sold digitally, it would be the best-selling one in Japan week 1. Then we have Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Momotaro Densetsu World, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Shiren the Wanderer, The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak. That sold 7,160 copies on the Switch there. Skull and Bones, 6,635 is, whew, that is rough. Animal Crossing, New Horizons, then Minecraft on the Switch, and then Persona 3 Reload on the PS5 rounds out the top 10. Moving over to the hardware, the Switch seems to have just found a floor in terms of sales, right in that 48 to 49,000 unit mark, here at 48,391. The PS5 below that, 38,212, with the Xbox Series, 1,647. The PS4 at 467, and the 3DS somehow 14 more of those things sold last week. But the Switch, I mean, it just continues on this trajectory of like that 48 to 50,000 units every single week. No major drop down at all for the Switch. But Mario vs. Donkey Kong, simplistic game. Sure, I believe many people were, of course, looking past it, but it just shows what the Switch is able to accomplish. Yes, with its overwhelming install size, but just the ability to sell software outright. It's something Nintendo has seemingly perfected this generation. Even something like Mario vs. Donkey Kong, probably going to be the best-selling one in its entire franchise at this point. And that goes back to the DS, which was obviously Nintendo's most successful system and something they're trying to still run down with the Switch. And before we go to the comments of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, would you be interested in picking up a PSVR 2 if it worked on PC? Look at this, 36% say yes, 64% say no. Yeah, I see a lot of people saying that the value is actually pretty good if you line it up with PC, but that to me really hinges on the idea that Sony wouldn't try to pull a fast one and have a launcher or something. If this was just, hey, we're going to release a driver, a program of some kind you download, and it'll set all that up for you, and then you can just do whatever you want with the headset, then yeah, I do believe that would really just accelerate sales for Sony at that point with this headset. But we already have people who have already kind of done that in the community, and they've had varying success with it. So really at the end of the day, it comes down to Sony kind of opening things up for PC with some sort of official support. And I think that is the move here, because I don't see the support from Sony when it comes to first-party games for VR, and I believe in their mind that it was going to do a lot better than it has so far in its first year. Remember, it has been a full year now since PSVR 2 came out, and I haven't seen anything super compelling to tell someone, hey, you gotta get PSVR 2, look at this, spend another $550 on top of the $500 machine you have now. But for PC, there's a whole world out there of VR experiences, and that'd actually be a pretty good headset to use for them. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day. We'll start with this one here. This is from Tom, who says, in the short term, I can see how Xbox will gain revenue from this, but it's hard to see how it wouldn't negatively affect hardware sales going forward. When the next generation of consoles release, surely there'll be a mass exodus from Xbox going to PlayStation. Is Game Pass enough or alone enough to keep people from buying Xbox hardware? So I think Microsoft, in their mind, believes they've already lost because of how badly that Xbox One hurt them, coming off of what was their high point with the Xbox 360. Look at the 360. They had the games, they had the ecosystem, even the digital purchasing, that started that generation. It was all there for them, but they got so transfixed on this Kinect thing that it really ended up hurting them. I mean, sure, the Xbox One had other stuff, TV being said like 30 times during that presentation, the always online stuff, the digital entitlements, DRM, but having that camera and being like, yeah, set this camera up in your room at all times, people weren't really interested in that. Again, I know your cell phone has a camera on it, but the idea, I feel like, of just having that in your house, in your living room, watching at all times, like, I'll just get the PS4 that's also, $100 cheaper. So from there, Microsoft, I guess at this point, doesn't feel like they can come back, even though we just watched Nintendo go from the Wii U to the Switch. In their mind, they're just going to try to tackle everything they can with their software and put it basically everywhere, or as they said, Xbox pretty much everywhere. So I am curious how this strategy works out for them, if they're once again too early to this whole thing, and 20 years from now we go, okay, yeah, Microsoft was ahead of the curve, or that was another big Xbox One level mistake by Microsoft. And then we'll go to a comment from the members video. We can see this. This is posted up by Loom Doom, who says, I'm so happy to see Final Fantasy VII Rebirth becoming the highest scoring Final Fantasy since Final Fantasy IX. Gene Park's review on the Washington Post was excellent, by the way. Shout out to Gene Park there. Go check it out. The game looks and sounds phenomenal, and I don't think some of the wonky parts with the ending will stay on my experience much. Next week can't come soon enough. Yes, I am very excited to see how this entry ends, but I'm excited too. It kind of feels like back in the day when a new Final Fantasy game was coming out. It was a lot different then. I know the build up to 16 was still pretty fun, but there was still a lot of controversy, a lot of infighting there with the Final Fantasy fans and that sort of thing. Whereas back in the day, even something like 8, 9, 10, 13 kind of too, but like there was still a lot of excitement and people were just ready to get their hands on that game. And it kind of feels that same way right now with Rebirth. Yes, it is kind of tapping into some nostalgia, clearly, with the characters, but I don't know, it just seems like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to get there. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with all the reviews and videos dropping yesterday. What'd you think of it, and are you picking it up next week? And then also, the PlayStation VR 2 getting PC support sometime in 2024. Do you think that's the thing that could help turn all this around for Sony when it comes to their recent headset? And then HiFi Rush on Nintendo's next system. Does that make sense? And do you think it's something that could be there potentially at launch? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.